Lesson 1, don't believe everything you hear. So I really want to instill this idea that you should not believe everything you hear. The internet is full of noise and people have good intentions and they may be true, they may not be true. But learning from other beginners is the biggest fault I have seen in years. I have seen people join Facebook groups, and I have a Facebook group with about 57,000 members in it, and people ask for tips and advice all the time, but they're getting tips and advice from other beginners, people who have not done it yet. So don't ask for tips and tricks from people who are also trying to figure things out. If they're in a similar position to you, their advice should be taken with a grain of salt. Always learn from people with real experience, such as employed senior developers, people who have actually been working in a job, who have maybe conducted interviews, who have done things like that for you. Now here's the thing is Facebook groups and LinkedIn groups are often a trap. Again, they have thousands of people saying the same thing, so it seems to be real. So when 1,000 people say something is true, chances are it's true. Not in this case. When 1,000 beginners tell you that the first thing you should be learning is Angular.js, AngularJS, you probably actually don't want to learn AngularJS. You're going to want to do a little bit of research and find out what you should be learning, and probably you'll want to learn React. That can change as well. We'll talk about what skills you should learn down the road. Now, the thing with these groups is they have really good intentions, but often they end up giving you bad advice because they simply don't know better. So they're not trying to misdirect you or steer you in the wrong direction. It's just they don't know too much better than what you currently know. And so you're all asking the same questions. So lesson number 1 here is don't believe everything you hear. Go to the root, the source of a problem, go to the source of the information, try to get as high up that chain as you can to get to the source of truth. And don't just listen to the thousands of people saying the same thing at the very bottom. You're going to want to listen to actual data, not just opinions. Last but not least, you do not need to know everything to apply for a job. A lot of people will tell you, oh, you need to know HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, Vue, Angular, Python, PHP, Node.js, Express, Mongo, Postgres, MariaDB, all these different things. You actually don't need to know a lot of those things. I'm going to teach you what you do need to know in this course, and you do not need to know all of those things. That's crazy. You also do not need the most spectacular portfolio website on the web. So a lot of people, they say things like, oh, you need to have a nice portfolio, but actually there's a better way to do it, and it doesn't necessarily involve you showing off what you've created in a visual way. It's more about showing off the code you've written. We'll talk about that in the future as well. All right, let's talk about the truth about GitHub. Okay, so the truth about GitHub is you do need a GitHub account. You do need to be an active member on GitHub, so you need to be able to create repositories, and you need to know how to use Git. Now, if at this point you're wondering, Caleb, what on earth is Git? Well, the thing is, it's a tool that nobody wants to talk about because everyone assumes you already know how to use it. We'll talk about what Git is in just a second, and GitHub is sort of the website version of this tool that we use. So Git is the tool that all web developers use to share code and collaborate with each other. I have never worked with a team that does not use Git. Git is a fundamental tool that every job position is going to require. It is absolutely mandatory. Even if they don't list it in their job posting or their job listing under the requirements section, they are still going to assume that you know Git. They're going to know you know Git, or they're going to assume you know Git the same way that they're going to assume you know HTML. It just doesn't need to be said. And GitHub, or github.com, is the web-based tool we use for reviewing each other's code and seeing code throughout history and different steps, different commits, things like that. But if you don't know what Git is, this is the first thing you need to be learning, is you need to know Git. You don't need to be an expert at it, you just need to be good enough to be dangerous with Git. So you're going to need an active GitHub account with lots of open source code, and all that open source code is going to be a lot better than a beautiful portfolio website. A beautiful portfolio website can be made by anybody, really. It doesn't necessarily have to be your code, but if someone can see all of your code on GitHub, and it's open source, remember, don't put like passwords or credit card numbers or anything secret in there. But if you put all your code in a GitHub repository, then employers can go and take a look at that, and they can actually see your coding style, that you have written this code yourself, that it doesn't belong to someone else, that you are actually able to prove that you have coding chops. Let's talk about the truth about portfolio sites. So we touched on this in lesson number 2. In lesson number 3, we're going to be talking about the truth around portfolio sites. So first of all, they're not as great as they seem. They are easy to build, and they don't actually prove that you wrote any code. We briefly touched on this in the last lesson. And they don't make it easy for employers to actually look at your code. So if you're looking for a job as a web developer, you want to be able to show your employer that, hey, I can actually write code. It's all about the code at the end of the day. And they're going to want to verify that you can write your own code, that you've got good code quality, that it's maintainable, that you're able to use Git. Things like that are all important. You should still have a portfolio website though, even if it's just to show off your GitHub account with some nice photos of your projects. It doesn't have to be amazing. Honestly, this is the whole, there's a saying, and I can't really remember the saying off the top of my head, so I'm going to paraphrase it, but it's like, the mechanic has the worst car, and web developers tend to have the worst portfolios because we make websites for other people all day, and so ours kind of aren't the greatest. And that's true for everyone's, even mine. If you go to like caleb.io, there are some flaws on there. It's totally fine, and I don't intend to fix them because I would rather work on other people's websites. But still, just like me, I have a portfolio website, and you should have a portfolio website, again, even if it is just to show off your GitHub account. Lesson number 4, don't get stuck on the small things. I cannot stress this enough, but do not let perfectionism hold you back. People say, oh, my code needs to be perfect before I put it on GitHub. My code needs to be perfect before I share it with anybody. My code needs to be perfect because of reason X, Y, or Z. None of those things are true. Don't let perfectionism hold you back. Learning too many things is going to hold you back as well. And often that's because you're going to be learning things that actually aren't necessary. They're not required. They might be fun, they might be cool, they might be hobby things to learn on your free time. But when you're trying to get a job, you want to learn things that are in demand. You want to learn skills that the market will pay you for. Next, watching too many tutorials is going to hold you back. This is a thing called tutorial hell, and people get stuck in it all the time. I see this thousands of times every single month. People are getting stuck in tutorial hell. So they'll watch tutorial videos or tutorial courses like this one, and then they'll watch another, and they'll watch another, and they think that confidence is going to come as soon as they learn more. But confidence comes when you start to actually experiment with things in real life. Try to put what you're learning in this course into practice, and that will build your confidence up. But watching too many tutorials over and over and over again literally gets you nowhere. It's no different than watching Netflix all day. It's just a little more educational. Here's another truth. You will never truly know 100% of any programming language. So don't think you need to watch just one more video to get the confidence that you need. And also, coding and coding related jobs are about quick iteration, not about perfectionism. So it's about making a mistake, learning from your mistake, and moving on, and doing that over and over and over and over and over again. Nothing needs to be perfect as long as you can iterate and improve upon it. Lesson 5, how to find out what skills are in demand. Do not start learning new skills without doing your research on what people are hiring for. What I mean by that is, do not learn AngularJS if everyone in the front-end world is looking for React.js. Do not learn a new skill or programming language because other beginners, like in a Facebook group, said so. Just because other people are saying it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. We've talked about this before in lesson number 1, I believe it was. Do not assume what you're learning will get you hired as a web developer. Just because you know a lot doesn't mean you're necessarily going to land that job. That's a very important thing to take away from this course. So first, always look at jobs in your area to see what they are hiring for. Second, write down the most common skills that they're looking for. So if they're looking for React, maybe they're looking for Python or Django, so that's a little more specific in the Python world, or Flask, something like that. So let's say React, let's say Flask, and let's say Postgres databases. And you see that 6 out of 10 employers are looking for these skills. You should go and learn those 3 skills. And so we covered bullet number 3 there. Third was learn the top 3 skills from your list, the most popular ones from your list. Lastly, feel confident to apply even if you aren't 100% there. We'll talk more about this in a little bit as well. The truth behind remote jobs. Okay, this is lesson number 6. So since COVID-19 hit, A lot of companies are hiring for remote jobs now, and this is becoming more and more of a standard. And what that means is you can work from home and somewhat make your own hours, and there's a lot of charm in being able to work from home. Remote jobs give you a lot of flexibility. Remote jobs free up time from driving to and from work. Remote jobs let you go to doctor's appointments and take care of your family and hang out with your kids during the day. But also, there is a downside. Remote jobs can be incredibly lonely. Remote jobs require a lot of discipline, often more discipline than what most people actually have. Remote jobs are harder to maintain because there's no social pressure from your peers to perform. There's no one in the office saying, hey, you're actually not doing your work, let's go and do some work. It's just you, and so there's not that extra social pressure to actually get things done. So the truth behind remote jobs is, yes, it can be glamorous, it can be great, it can be amazing, and I work a remote job right now, but also it's not as easy as people think it is. Lastly, with every remote job, you will absolutely need to know Git and how to use github.com or gitlab.com. Lesson 7, what companies are really looking for. Companies are really looking for often things that you wouldn't expect. So they're looking for good people who are kind and understanding. Okay, we're sort of expecting that. No company wants to hire someone who doesn't fit in, who doesn't have a polite conversation with their coworkers, who can't have a polite conversation with their coworkers. Companies are looking for people who are willing to admit that they don't know something and that they are willing to learn that something that they don't know. And that's totally okay in our industry to be like, oh, you know what? I actually don't know about, for example, how to scale servers up. That's something I'm really interested in. I want to go and learn that. And companies are looking for people who have taught themselves the basics already, such as HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and Git and GitHub. What companies don't want to do is hire you as an intermediate developer, find out that you're junior and that you don't actually know a lot of this stuff and you're looking for someone to pay you to learn. They want you to take care of the basics on your own. And that's actually changed from about 4-ish years ago. Companies were like, oh, okay, well, if you don't know everything, that's fine, we'll teach you. And these days it's more like, oh, well, there's so many resources on the internet, you need to learn how to do this stuff yourself now. So companies are not looking for people who think they know everything. You know, those know-it-all people who are like, actually, you're wrong about everything. They're not looking for those types of people. Companies are not looking for people who are smart, but don't have strong enough communication skills. So yes, they want smart people, but if you can't communicate your ideas, your smarts, it's hard to say it this way, but your smarts really aren't worth all that much if you can't communicate your ideas or your thoughts or your smarts across to another human being. But they are looking for people who can learn on the job, who are nice to their peers, who can leave their egos at the door, who are willing to learn something that they don't currently know. So companies are looking for essentially good people who are willing to learn, who have, strong enough communication skills to get an idea across, but are also looking for people who are humble enough to be like, you know what, I don't actually know too much about this particular subject. Let's defer this to someone who knows more. Lesson number 8, your resume strategy. First off, one size does not fit all. No two companies are alike, even if their job postings are identical. What I want you to take away from this lesson is to tailor your resume based on your skills and the job you're applying for. And so in this lesson, your resume strategy, the idea is you have more than one resume. And this is a mistake that a lot of people still make today in all industries. So let's create an example here. I don't want you to submit a Python-heavy resume if the job that you're applying for is asking for JavaScript. That's back-end versus front-end coding. So instead, what you would do is you'd create a new resume that highlights all of your JavaScript skills and shows off Python as a supplemental skill. So it's like, hey, yes, I can do JavaScript, but I can also do Python. Next, know your audience. You're shooting in the dark by handing out a resume to a stranger. That's really all you're doing, is you're saying, hey, stranger, are you willing to hire another stranger? And that's, first of all, that's risky. We'll talk more about that in the future as well. But the best thing you can do is make sure that if that resume actually reaches someone, that it's tailored to the job posting and it's going to get through the stage where someone looks at your resume and says, oh, they obviously didn't read about this job posting, scrap it. So make sure you're tailoring your resumes. If you need 7 different resumes, you need 7 different resumes. And I use that number because when I'm looking for a job, that's roughly the number I have. I have 7 different resumes for different skills, different job positions that I use. And that works really, really well. Now, the difference is, if you're applying to work at, and let's use a very simple example here. You're applying to work at McDonald's and you want to flip burgers, but you've never flipped burgers before. What you have done is snow removal or construction. Now, that's cool. It shows that you have worked a job before, but it's not relatable. They're very, very, very different skills. And so you would want to create a new resume that basically says, hey, yes, I have flipped burgers for at least my grandpa's parties or something like that, or a barbecue or something that's a little more tailored to it. And then you can also say on that same resume, you've worked construction and you've done snow removal before. But always make sure you tailor your resume to your target audience and that job posting. Lesson number 9, do resumes really get you an interview? Here's the truth, most of the time, no, they will not get you an interview. Does it hurt to try going the resume submission route? Absolutely not. You might as well. What's the harm in submitting a resume? They don't call you back? Well, they were never going to call you anyways because they didn't know about you. You might as well submit a resume. Will a resume mean that you get an interview? No, absolutely not. So why even use a resume? Frankly, using a resume is a lot like winning the lottery. You can't win if you don't play. So occasionally a resume will actually get you the job, or at least it'll get your foot in the door and get you some practice with interviewing. So a resume can be useful. What I suggest is submit your resumes anyways, because it's like buying free lottery tickets. And employers will eventually ask for your resume anyways, even if you have a personal referral. You have a friend who works at a company and they're getting you the interview. That company's probably still going to ask for a resume. So make sure you have a tailored resume. Not a regular generic resume, but a tailored resume for that position. Lesson number 10, applying for the job. When you see a web development job posting, you'll probably be overwhelmed. I'm going to tell you this, and I say this knowing that it's not an easy thing to do, but apply anyway. When you see a posting that requires like 30 skills that you don't have, but you have the 2 main skills that they're looking for, apply anyway. Always, always, always apply for that job. Job postings tend to stay up for quite a while in the tech industry because they either get a lot of bad resumes, and that's why I'm telling you to tailor your resumes, or they don't get any applications whatsoever because a lot of people are like, oh, well, the job posting says I need 30 skills. I only have the top 3. Sure, they're the most important 3 out of those 30, but I don't have all 30, and so I'm not going to apply. And that's what a lot of people say, and that's not a good enough reason to not apply. So always assume a company didn't get enough applications. Always assume a company isn't hiring purely for skill and that they're hiring for a personality fit, and that you might be one of those good personality fits. You can also assume that if you submit a resume, maybe you aren't right for the job, but maybe you are right for another job that's coming up. You never know, so always apply for that job anyways. Lesson number 11, maximizing your efforts. Looking for a job posting, applying for it, and having tailored resumes is a lot of work. And frankly, it's slow and it's painful. If you need a job as soon as possible, consider maximizing your efforts by employing someone else to job hunt for you. And what I'm talking about here is a recruitment agency. So if you apply for, let's say, 5 jobs per day, and they apply for 5 jobs in that same day, you are reaching 200% more companies in the same amount of time. Basically, you've doubled your efforts. Now, the nice thing about this is with a recruiting agency, they have a person whose job is to find you a job and gets paid whenever you start that job. There's no money coming out of your pocket whatsoever. If you ever meet a recruiting agency or a recruitment firm that's like, oh, you need to give us some money, just walk away. Now, the nice thing about using a recruitment agency or a recruiting firm is you can always say no to jobs that you think are not a right fit for you. Lesson number 12, the big secret. This is a big one. This is the biggest one. This is the lesson you're waiting for in this course. If you take one lesson away from this course, it's this one, the big secret. Resumes are okay. They work sometimes. Recruiting agencies are pretty good, and they work often. But there's a better way to get into the job industry. And it takes a little bit of time, but while you're learning anyways, you might as well put this into practice. Start looking at job hiring from a company's perspective. Who is a bigger risk, a random resume versus someone from a recruitment agency? Well, a random resume is a bigger risk. They don't know you. There's no one vouching for you. There's no one doing any sort of pre-interview interview with you. They just don't know. Or who is a bigger risk here? A recruitment agency or someone hired from a recruitment agency, or hiring someone you know? Well, you're always going to hire someone you know. You know that person. You know what they're like. You sort of understand how they work in business and as an employee and things like that. So they're always going to go with someone they know. Now, hiring is expensive for companies. It is super, super expensive. It's also a long process. They take a shortcut whenever they can, just because it is so long and expensive. So whenever you hear your boss say, hey, do you know someone who's looking for a job? There's a reason they're asking that. And the reason they're asking that is because employees, if they have friends who are looking for a job, can recommend those people. Now, chances are you are friends with similar people to yourself. You were a good fit, you got hired at a job, and your friend likely will be a good fit too when they get hired at that same job. You don't need to waste time sorting through online applications and paper resumes. And remember, we're still talking about putting yourself in the company's shoes right now. And lastly, the company gets to save money by not posting a job application whatsoever. So here's the big secret. Expand your network of friends. And I know this sounds really scary, especially in this day and age where everything is online. People have a lot of anxiety. I understand that. But you need to expand your network of friends. And the idea here is be the person who gets recommended when someone at your dream company says, yes, I know someone who we can hire. And that someone they're thinking of is you. Now, you can do this by going to meetups, going to co-working spaces, going to cafes, and meeting people there. And just get to know other people who have their laptop open, because you never know who's going to be hiring. And it's always nice to have friends in your back pocket to just be like, hey, yeah, I know Caleb. Caleb knows how to code. He's a good coder. Let's hire him. And the same thing can happen to you. So what's the takeaway here? Well, let's consider this. Who is going to get hired? Out of all the different scenarios that we ran, all the different scenarios we can run, friends of friends at the company you just applied at are going to get hired. If I work at a company and I make a recommendation to hire you, you are probably going to get at least an interview. You probably don't even need to submit a resume. Lesson 13. Who do companies really hire? Companies do not hire people just because they are smart. Companies do not hire people just because they have an education. Companies do not hire people just because you have a perfect resume. So who do companies really hire? Companies hire people who are a good fit. Companies hire people who have proven they can thrive on their own, who can learn on their own, who have a little bit of ambition to go and learn more on their own time. Companies hire people who can work well with others. So even if you don't get along with all of your coworkers, and don't get me wrong, I have worked with people that I do not get along with whatsoever. I still respect them and I still treat them nicely, but I don't really get along with them. We just sort of have opposing views, and that's going to happen no matter where you work. But companies hire people who can still work well with those people. And that is very, very important. Lesson number 14, the most valuable skills you can have in this industry. So the most valuable skills you can have in this industry, let's talk about skills that actually, honestly, are not that valuable. It's not brains. You don't need to be the smartest person in the room. Honestly, that's super, super true. It's not 4 years of university or college or 2 years or 6 years or 8 years. It's honestly, it has nothing to do with college or university these days. It has nothing to do with being able to type fast. It has nothing to do with being able to code anything. The most valuable skill you can have in this industry is being able to work well with others. So having communication. Being able to take direction and advice. So are you mentorable? That's important. And being able to have a friendly conversation with anybody, even if you don't get along with that person. Friendliness is very important, especially in this day and age where remote jobs are everywhere, people are working from home. It's really easy to sound snarky and sarcastic online when really you're not trying to be. And so being able to have a friendly conversation with anybody and clarify what you mean and not get upset and get into some sort of online feud with a coworker, aka friendliness, is very important. Lesson number 15, your first interview. When you get to your first interview, there's going to be a few tips and tricks that I'm going to give you that you're going to need. First of all, be a friendly person and hold a conversation. That's really, really important. Can you hold a conversation, or are you super, super awkward? If you're super awkward, that might demonstrate that you don't necessarily have the personality skills, or not the personality skills, the communication skills to work with a team. Or if you're just really shy, well, this is not the time to be shy. Don't be shy in an interview. But also don't be a know-it-all. Don't tell everyone that you know everything. Don't tell them that they're wrong unless they really are wrong and they're trying to trick you with some sort of question. But don't be a know-it-all. Nobody likes that type of person. When you go to your first interview, always walk in with the mentality that I'm going to meet someone smarter than me today. And always walk in with that same mentality that I'm going to meet someone smarter than me and I'm going to try to make friends with that person. That's the mentality that you want in your first interview. They're probably not scoping out your skills or how much knowledge you have. They want to see if you're a good personality fit to begin with. And also, please acknowledge everybody in the room. I have heard of nightmare stories where there has been a particular person in the room that was never acknowledged for one reason or another. Make sure you acknowledge everybody in the room. So again, your first interview is not usually about the skills, usually. Your first interview is usually to see what kind of person you are. It's your chance to show off your communication skills and to make friends with strangers who are interviewing you. They want to see how well you can get along with people in the office. And if you can get along with the people interviewing you, either senior developers or managers, chances are you can get along with everybody else as well. Lesson 16, follow up. After your interview, you likely won't hear from the company right away. In fact, you might not hear from them for a week or 2 weeks or a month or 3 months or 6 months. I have heard of stories where a company interviewed someone and 6 months later, they got a call back saying, hey, you did really well on that interview. Would you like to start with us? That is absurd. You want to make sure you follow up. Take the responsibility into your own hands and follow up. So if you don't hear from a company within 7 days, 1 week, feel free to email them about the position. And be friendly, be polite, and let your curiosity show. Now, if the follow-up ends with you not getting the job, don't be disheartened. That's okay. Consider this as interview practice for your next opportunity. Use this as an opportunity to learn what you could have done better. Ask them. Be like, hey, thank you for the opportunity, and I'm trying to get into this industry, but, would you be able to spare a few minutes and give me some ideas of where maybe I went wrong, or where I could learn more, or where I could do better? Be open to accepting feedback. Not only does that show them, hey, you might have actually been the right person for the job, and they might maybe change their mind, but also, B, it gives you the feedback you need to improve yourself, to improve your interviewing skills, so next time you can succeed. So what I'm saying here is use everything that happens to you as an opportunity to learn. Lesson 17, negotiating your salary. This is a very hard subject to talk about. Because salaries change from all over the world, depending on your job, depending on all sorts of different things, salaries just are such a range, it's hard to talk about. But one thing I can guarantee you is aim higher than you originally think you're worth. A lot of people, no, scratch that, almost everybody thinks they're worth less than what they actually are. So if you think you're worth like $12 an hour, jack that price up to $20 an hour and say, that's what I want. I want $20 an hour. Or if you think you're worth $20 an hour, crank that price up to $30 an hour and say, this is what I want. I want $30 an hour. Now, the reason you want to go higher rather than lower, and don't go too high. Don't be like, I want $100 an hour. Make it within the industry standard, the average, and you might need to do a little bit of research here. But you want to go higher because you can always backtrack for a lower rate. It's a lot easier to go high and then step down to a lower value than to start at a low number and then try to be like, oh, actually, I want a higher number. So it's easier to backtrack. Now, the thing about negotiating your salary is it's not all about the money. Make sure you ask about benefits. Make sure you ask about time off or vacation time. Ask about perks. Do they give you free ebooks? Do they give you weekly lunches? Dedicated time with a mentor? Do they let you play ping pong for an hour a day? Do they give you an hour or two a day or a week to work on your own stuff? What other perks do they have? This is really, really important because some companies will offer a lot of perks, but they don't necessarily offer the salary. If a company offers a lot of perks, they will likely pay less. And in a lot of cases, that's actually okay because in a lot of studies, happiness doesn't come from money. It doesn't come from having a high salary. Happiness comes from things like perks, like weekly lunches. It makes you feel valued because the company is actually doing something for you beyond just the standard contract of paying you for your time. Now, if your goal is to make a ton of money, I'm going to tell you this right now, standard employment is not for you. Rather, you'll want to be a contractor. Contractors make a lot more money. So as a salaried employee, and I'll tell you right now, I typically make somewhere around $40, $45 an hour. As a contractor, I will make $70 to $95 an hour, somewhere in there depending on who I'm working with and what the work is, how long the work is, things like that. So think about that jump from the low numbers. Let's say $45 versus $70, or the high numbers. Let's say like the difference between $50 and $90, $95 an hour. That's the difference between employment and contracting. Now, contracting, you don't get any of the perks. You have to do all of your own accounting. You have to do all of your own taxes. You have to do all of that stuff. So there is more overhead. But if you want to go for money, standard employment is not for you. Now, all of these techniques can still be used from a contractor's point of view. You can still say, hey, I want that interview. And then once they offer you the job, you're like, well, actually, I'm wondering if you have a contractor position open. And it's actually a lot easier for companies to just contract you out rather than to be an employee. It means they don't have to deal with things like payroll. Lesson 18, once you're in, what do you do? Once you land a job and you have a new role, learn as much as you can, as fast as you can. I could honestly sum up this entire lesson in that 10 seconds right there. Learn as much as you can, as fast as you can. Don't forget to be friendly, be curious, and always be learning, but this time, you get to learn while you're getting paid. You should be able to spend somewhere around 2 years at any tech job learning a lot before you hit that glass ceiling and you decide to move on. So once again, the takeaway here is learn as much as you can, as fast as you can, while you're learning on someone else's dime. And I believe it was Warren Buffett who originally said something like that. Whenever you can, learn on someone else's dime. I'm paraphrasing that, heavily paraphrasing that. But the idea here is when someone is paying you, learn as much as you can. Lesson 19, your next steps. Your next step is going to be to research job postings and what skills are in demand. For example, find out if React or Django or Node.js or Python, whatever the skills are, you want to research those postings and find out what skills are in demand, commonly across all these different job postings. Take the top 3 most in-demand skills and learn them. Take the time to learn them. Take the time out of your day to really get a good understanding of the top 3 skills. Then I want you to meet people at these companies that are hiring and become friends with them. That's your next step. Go to meetups, find them on LinkedIn, find them on Twitter, find them on Instagram, have conversations with these people, and just sort of work your way into their network somehow so that you can be friends with them. When a company is hiring, ask your friend for a recommendation. So let's say, I don't work for Google. I'm going to put that out there right now. But if I did work for Google and you were one of my friends, and you were looking for a job, I would 100% expect you to say, hey, Caleb, I'm applying for this job. Would you be able to give me some sort of recommendation or referral or advice even? And then your next step is going to be submit your resume, and you'll get bumped up to the top of the list because you already have someone referring you, recommending you, and you'll get that interview right away. And so that sort of skips the whole submitting a resume and having to compete with 1,000 other people. You get bumped to the top right away. Lesson 20, earn while you learn. How can you earn while you learn? So while you're learning, you should be earning. What that means is be a contractor and apply the new things that you learn to a client's website. I want you to, every time you learn a new skill, go and try and get a client, a contract with, let's say, a small local business, and apply what you're learning. Look at local companies in your city and take note of how bad their websites are. Their websites are usually pretty terrible. Offer to make them a hand-rolled website for cheap and use that to apply your newest set of skills. So you might not actually make a good hourly margin off of any of this work really, but you are making some money, so you're earning, and you get to apply what you've learned, so you're learning. Earn while you learn. Now here's the thing is, solving real-world problems will teach you tech-based problems and solutions faster than any online course ever could. I could create a course that's 25 hours long that goes through every problem that I have ever encountered and the solutions to each of those problems. And honestly, you're just going to watch 25 hours of content and you're not actually going to absorb the experience. You're not going to make it part of your life. So solving real-world problems with real-world clients will teach you tech-based problems and solutions faster than any online course ever can. Lesson number 21, your project. Your project is to make at least 3 resumes and share screenshots with the class. Blur out your name, change your name, do what you need to do to keep yourself private, please. I don't want you to overexpose yourself if that makes you uncomfortable, but definitely make 3 different resumes and share screenshots with the class. Then I want you to take a screenshot of the job listing site you're using, like maybe it's Indeed.com, and share that with the class. And that just sort of shows us that you're using another job listing site out there. Then I want you to do some research on the top 3 most in-demand skills for web developers in your city and share that with the class. So if it's React, Django, and maybe Postgres in New York City, take a look at that. And those are your top 3. I want you to share that with the class. Lastly, I want you to look for 3 people at the top 3 companies in your city that you would like to work for and join them on LinkedIn, Twitter, or Instagram. Just choose 2 out of 3 options. Don't make it too creepy. And then I want you to say hi to them and ask for web development advice. Don't ask them how to get a job. Don't ask them if they will get you a job. Ask them for web development advice. Ask to pick their brain. Ask them to share their knowledge and experience and really just share their brain with you. Do that, and that's a quick way to win friends.